Hello and welcome to Small Town Big Life Podcast, coming at you from the tool shed behind Grace Fellowship Church. Have two wonderful guests with us today, Dave Lindsey and Kevin Johnson, and we're going to talk about the existence of evil, which is a lot to cover in an hour, but we're gonna give it a shot because it is something people talk about quite often, and we talk about it outside of this podcast. So we thought it'd be fun to address it for everyone to hear, and we'll get rolling right now with, like I said, Kevin, you guys are both geniuses, right? You worked for NASA and the government and spies and like James Bond stuff, right?
Oh, yes, but I can't tell you anything about it or I'd have to kill you. So.
Okay, but in all seriousness, tell everyone a little bit about your background so they don't...
I have a degree in computer science and a minor in mathematics, and I was a software engineer for 30 years and did quite a bit of exactly what you said. I did work for Harris Space Systems for NASA for about 3 years back in the 90s. One of the highlights of my career. Worked on submarines, satellite communications, intelligence. And then I retired to become an insurance agent because, the excitement was just too much and I had to,
Right. Yeah.
So, yes, I've been involved in the church since I was like a couple days old, probably.
A couple days old?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Dave, I know you were a professor of theology and a doctor and also have some James Bond qualities, right?
I do.
I don't know. I'm asking, I guess.
No, I don't have any. What James Bond quality are you talking about?
I don't know.
I do like 18-year-old scotch.
Yeah. Well,
That's the only quality I know of.
Try and stop me. Yeah. So, but seriously, you have a background and you've taught theology and stuff.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are a doctor.
I am a medical doctor.
Okay. So, and Jackie and I are here to hopefully keep things on the lower shelf for everyone.
Speak for yourself. I'm a card-carrying member of Mensa.
Okay.
Thank you very
right.
much.
I had a 4.0. I graduated with. So maybe we got a chance.
4.0
right.
in basket weaving.
Yep. Okay, so in all seriousness, this topic, the existence of evil, is pretty massive, and I wrote down some talking points. You can really start with this topic anywhere. Why does God allow evil to exist is probably the most common question. If you're a Christian and you're talking to someone who's not, sometimes the reason they give is because they say, well, if there was a God, there wouldn't be so much evil in the world. So who wants to go first on this?
How do you define evil?
Okay.
That was my first question. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
True.
But expand on
Except with contractions.
how you explain. Dave, you need to get your mic closer to you. Just pull that closer so it's closer to your mouth.
Just a little.
There you
I
go.
didn't even get this close to my wife.
There we go. All right. Anyway, go ahead. Expand on that. So you're talking to someone.
I asked the question, so someone else needs to answer. What is the definition of evil?
Well, what's your opinion? You're a NASA scientist.
We never discussed evil at NASA, so
Yeah, but
Well, it's not an intellectual topic. It's a reality. It's the fabric of reality topic. It's
question is more: is evil actually a noun or is it an adjective? Is evil something on its own?
Yeah.
Or is evil used to describe something else, like actions?
Like, is there a transcendent evil, or is
Yes.
something evil just because you don't like it? Like, in other words, if you get cancer and you expected to live to 90 years old, is that evil? Because it's only affecting you. It's not a transcendent evil that's evil everywhere. So is that evil, or is it just an unfortunate thing for you?
That's
That's
Yeah.
the question.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yep.
How do you respond to it, Dave, when people
well,
ask?
there's different types of evils.
Okay.
There's the physical evils. For instance, cancer would be a physical evil. That's something over which you have no control. A tsunami would be a physical evil. That's something over which you have no control. And then I would say that there's a personal evil. That's something over. Then I'm really cutting it down. There's 5 or 6 types of evil. But there's a personal evil, that which you have control over. But his point is I think what he's saying is evil, an object, or is evil a thing? What is evil? Because if God created everything and everything was good, then did God create evil? And if evil is a thing, then it was created by God. Then therefore is God evil? Or is evil a concept? Or is evil something different than a thing? Like it's not a rock. It's not a wire on this table. Is evil something is more of a concept? And is everything always evil? So
you mean
my point, I guess another way of putting my point is evil isn't evil until when somebody acts on it. And an act is not necessarily something that's created. God is the creator. God created two things. He created whatever, if he's created or not, but he created the created.
Yeah.
And is evil something he created, or is it an offshoot, or is it an ancillary thing to one of his creations? So is it an object, or is it a subjective thing?
Well, he kind of touched on the idea of creatio ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, which did not arise until the 2nd century. Prior to that, they didn't necessarily believe that God created everything. It was more of an institution of order into existing chaos. So, once again, it's like, did the early theologians paint us into a logical paradox?
Or an illogical paradox?
Yes, where, if God created everything and evil is a thing that exists, by definition, God had to create it. That's the logic paradox, which has been argued ever since time began. So, Dave mentioned earlier when we suggested this topic that this has been debated and talked about endlessly, and
that's because it always will be, because the finite is overwhelmed by the infinite. And we live in the finite, and we're asking questions about the infinite. And so, in a way, humankind will always chase its tail while existing in the infinite, in the finite. We're asking questions about the infinite, and we can't see outside of this glass ball. The finite is overwhelmed by the infinite, and it'll never stop being a discussion, a topic, talking point.
Well, I think it was Augustine in the 5th century who points that out. I think it was Confessions, in his book Confessions, where we're limited by the language itself. The language, by definition, is limited to within time.
Yeah.
And you can't express something beyond time with a language that is
while
defined
dwelling
by
inside
time.
of it. Jackie, when somebody asks you, I don't believe in God because how do you respond?
You're saying if they ask if
they tell you, if there is a God or there's no God, because he wouldn't let all this evil exist if he existed. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's a very long conversation.
I know. Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah.
But
in 30 words or less, how do you respond?
In 30 minutes or less.
Yeah.
So, asking the theologians, wasn't Lucifer an angel before he fell?
Yeah.
So God created Lucifer, and then because he had free will and decided to defy God, he got sent to hell. So in that act, did Lucifer create evil?
Well, evil is
Well, now we're back to the definition of evil.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Evil created.
So if someone asks me how God allows evil in the world, it's like
evil proves God's existence. Evil proves God's existence because if you have something that's if you don't have something that is good, you have no standard to measure evil against, and which is why some people environmentally don't think evil is evil. They don't think robbing a liquor store is evil. They don't think mugging someone's evil because their mindset is in an environment where that is the norm. And so you can take that same way of thinking and apply it to brilliant men, and it still applies. You have to have good in order to know what to measure evil against. What's the standard? So the standard is God. So that's ultimately the standard. That's how we know something's evil, because we say, what is the ultimate standard of good? which if there is a, you know what's good in your heart, the laws of God. If there's a law, there has to be a lawgiver. So if there was no, to me, the existence of evil, or what we would acknowledge as a transcendental evil, is only because God exists. So it proves to me God exists. It doesn't. When people say, "Well, I don't believe there's a God. If there was, He wouldn't allow such evil." Let me stop you right there. Yeah, He would, and it's like what you just said. There is a Satan. There is a devil, and he's God's devil because God made him. And people don't like that reality. They don't like what's good to God is not the same thing that's good to us. And people say, well, if it's not good for me, then certainly it couldn't be good for God. Not so fast. How do you know that? And you know, anyway, I don't want to get too preachy. But
Do you think that there's also a theory that God permits evil and really terrible things to happen in order to see if we'll step up? So, like the Holocaust, things like that, to see if humans will step up and stop it and be bigger than ourselves.
That's an interesting question. Remember the movie? I don't know if you'll remember this, but in the 70s, there was a movie called Oh, God, and it starred George Burns as God, and John Denver was a grocery
Really?
store. You should look it up. John Denver was a grocery store clerk, married, and he meets him, and he's like, he has a hard time believing that he's God, and after a while, he comes to believe it. And he asked that question. He said, people doubt you because they want to know if you exist. Why do you allow so much evil in the world? And I thought, wow, this is going to be interesting to see how George Burns answers this question.
Really.
And he said, I don't allow it to go on. You do. And
Right.
he said, what do you mean? He goes, you could stop all this if you wanted to, but you don't want to. And he said, and I know that we would really need to unpack that a lot.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a pretty clever answer for a movie script, you know. I thought it was. So, and there are a lot of things in the world that we allow. That people always blame the devil. Devil made me do it. No, you did that.
The days of Flip Williams is over.
Yeah.
Nobody believes that anymore.
Yeah.
You still haven't defined what you think evil is. What is evil? We're using that term, but are we using it loosely, or is
What do
there a
you
specific-
say it is? I mean, what? Yeah, you know, and I know it's a big question, and it's but
Well, I think evil is the absence of good.
it is. Yeah.
That's simple as that. I think
Yeah.
evil is in and of itself. Evil isn't evil until we act on it.
That was Thomas Aquinas, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
And
the whole
it was also Saint Augustine.
Yeah.
Both of them did that. Said that is that there is really no evil until human beings act on it, and that, of course, takes the onus off of God, because there's free will in there. And I used to think that free will, by the way, we talked about that before, and I used to think that was a very simplistic answer.
It is a very simplistic answer.
But as I've studied it over the years, I found out that I can come up with no greater explanation than free will. Free will goes all the way back to the pre-existence, what you were talking about. Satan, even before the earth was formed, there was existence, and Satan was the son of the morning. He was an elevated angel, cherub, whatever you want to call him, depending on whether you're reading Ezekiel or Isaiah. Nevertheless, he made somewhere along the line, even though he lived with God, he made that choice. So free will is a gift from God.
So something that he says a lot is, in services, is there's desire, and then acting on the desire is sin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
You haven't sinned yet over here.
Yes.
So is it like that
Yes.
it's evil, it's floating around?
Evil is floating. I suppose it's floating around, but
Like-
that still doesn't define what evil is unless you become very simplistic and say evil is that which God does not want.
yeah. It is the absence of, like the adage we talk about. You know, we don't measure cold. We measure the absence of heat. We don't measure darkness. We measure the presence of light. You know, and evil. The whole school of thought. I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's that, and it's the absence of God. It's not that God is not there. It's God is not present in the thoughts and the minds of people acting. Because that's what defines. Ultimately, I don't agree with that. A weather event is evil. I don't think that. I just think that's a weather event. I think good and evil will be tested after the weather event. When you watch something on the news and we see tragedy and dead bodies and ambulances and people bleeding out and screaming in pain, you always see the little specks of God's in there, the helpers, the people picking them up, the people carrying.
Look what happened after 9/11.
Yeah, the people carrying the stretchers. There's the people are so focused on the evil that they're both present. They're both there. But you looked like you were getting ready to say something.
It kind of reminds me of talking about the simplistic explanations. It reminds me of several months ago. I can't even remember what the situation was, but I'm thinking it was political, where my cousin said, "You do believe God is in control, don't you?" Because something had happened that she didn't like, and I could either give the default answer of, "Well, yes, of course," and I said, "No one's ever asked me that directly." And I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Well, if you don't think he's in control, it's a scarier world if he's not in control.
But I think the book you recommended a couple months ago, Michael Heiser,
right.
The Unseen Realm, that goes into a lot of what most Christians never think about. And that is the unseen realm, the divine counsel.
Did you finish reading that? That's a Dave book too.
I got through most of it, but I told you that I didn't like it because it tended to equate Christianity too closely to the polytheistic religions of the past, and I thought that could lead too many people down the path to just
I don't think the book is fascinating because I try to steer someone in theologically any direction. It's Michael Heiser and his brilliance with his understanding of Hebrew. That's his topic, but that's another conversation. So get back to what you were saying. I'm sorry.
I just said that I think it's a lot more complicated than just God is in control. Well, if he's in absolute control, then everything that happens is his fault. You can't. Again,
well, I mean, fault is the negative. That's the saying it in the negative is when you apply the word fault to the description.
Exactly.
It's like you yourself said a minute ago. We lack in language so we use the word fault, and that's a powerful word. That is a powerful word. And when you say it's God's fault, to the average person, that puts a very specific.
And that's an argument used by atheists. So since I've read and seen so many debates between atheists and apologists and theologians, I know what they're thinking. I mean, and that's one of the arguments they present.
Yeah.
So we need to have an answer for it.
So I don't know this. So an atheist believes that even though they don't believe in God, they believe that if you believe in God and you believe that God is in control of everything, then
they point out the logic problem. That if God is in control of everything, then everything that happens must be his will, and therefore if evil exists, evil occurs, then God wants it to occur because he's in control. So that's the argument they use.
It's the Epicurus argument.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what it is. Epicurean argument.
I still think I can't help but thinking about this when we think about this topic about the fall of man, and the reason we have faith in Christ is because we're still metaphorically speaking, we're still in time out. We're still in the punishment. We're still in the fallen world. We're still living in a place that is full of sadness and full of pain and full of suffering, and that's why we need Christ. Believe in me, you'll get out. You're still in your getting your swats, so to speak. And as soon as we step out of the finite, this is going to seem so insignificant. I think we wake up again, not literally, but when we transform, I think we look back on this and go, "Did that just happen?" The way when you have a deja vu or something, I think you're going to look at this whole life that way, and it's going to feel like, did that really just happen? And here we're so preoccupied because even believers, we tend to hold all our importance in everything that occurs from womb to tomb, and if from womb to tomb I'm not safe and comfortable that whole time, and in this period, that's evil. Something bad happened to me. I wasn't unhappy. That's evil. No, it's not. It's you live in this world, and so I think, I don't know. I mean, that's my take on it. That smells like vodka.
No, it doesn't.
I'm kidding, by the way. I'm kidding. Whenever people don't show up to church, I make the announcement they're not here because they're at an AA meeting. And Denisha told me she wouldn't be at church Sunday. I know podcast folks. I said, okay, well, I'm telling everyone you're at an AA meeting. So
And he
she
did.
She said something about, at least tell him NA, like narcotics and all. I said, okay, we'll jazz it up a little bit. But just sorry, I had to break the seriousness there.
No problem.
I know full well you're a rum drinker. No, I'm kidding.
Whiskey.
So we could talk about the existence of evil. I think we make kind of a. I mean, I've already talked to you guys, and I know I've talked to you about that. We've all talked about this topic, but let me ask you this: does evil benefit mankind at all? In other words, because you know evil in your life, you know good. You know what good is. Does that help shape humanity, not just you personally, but do you believe that it helps people understand the measure of what good is because they have bad experiences with they have experiences with evil? So is there anything good to be had from the existence of evil from us in a learning perspective?
Well, I hope so. We have no option.
Yeah,
evil is.
But you know how some people, they say you just can't, they just don't learn, or they'll never learn,
Yeah, a lot of my professors told me that. You'll never learn.
Yeah.
Does evil? Is there good? Are you asking? Is there any good that comes from evil?
Well,
is that what you're asking?
No, I'm not asking if good comes from. I'm saying, does it benefit humanity in terms of strengthening their resolve to move towards God because they have a clear understanding of evil? Like people say, well, I say, if you don't believe that, there's evil or there's a devil or whatever, just look out the window.
Well, you just opened a Pandora's box of philosophical ideas.
Well,
is there an afterlife, and what's in the afterlife?
Well, I'm a pastor, and we're meeting in a Christian church, so we are going to agree that there's an afterlife.
Okay, so we're going to limit it then to just Christian theism, period.
I would have to, because I've given the other ones a chance and a fair shake, and they put our feet to the fire.
So there's no sense in talking about atheists, because there are no atheists in this room right now.
Well,
right?
I've debated them, and it's exhausting, and it's only exhausting because I just repeat the same thing, and it's like talking to a wall. So they keep coming back and repeating the same thing as if repeating it's going to make it so. And that's been my experience with talking with atheists. So
it's like talking to a divorcee.
How so?
No, the problem is not an unfaithful lover. It's the warping of a hypothesis of a good marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
God does have a plan. God has this. God is. We can't get around that. And an atheist, you just can't talk to them. It's like they have a chip on their shoulder. And the matter of fact, atheism, in my opinion, is a religion.
Okay.
It's a belief system, and I'm not going to pound on this table again.
Right.
It is
a religion.
Else. Kevin, come over here. I'll pound on you.
It is a religion. You're right. I mean, a lot of people have that have that belief, and I do too. I think because you have to push it, you have to convince people. I don't feel the need to go out and tell everyone in the world every day that there's no unicorns. And if I see someone, I'm going to tell them why I don't believe in unicorns. I don't because if I think it's silly, why am I even talking about it? Mm-hmm. And atheism is a religion. It's a.
If you want to hear the atheist response to that, it would be that would be like saying that not collecting coins is a hobby. So. Well,
they also, I know, and I've also heard the argument, but unicorns aren't trying to run legislature through their beliefs, and you are with God. Mm-hmm. But back to the existence of evil and the question: does it benefit humankind at all? And in the capacity of giving them a better understanding of what good is?
even if that's not the explanation, it has to have a purpose or it wouldn't exist.
Right. So
therefore,
okay, now we're getting somewhere. So it's purposed. It's purposed, in other words. God said, yeah, let this happen. Right?
yeah.
Okay. You believe that?
Yeah, and another important point you just made is God allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
God didn't create it. He doesn't make us do evil. He allows us to do evil.
Right.
It's our own free will.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And I'm sorry about this.
I agree.
Simplicity of it all. But that's just the way it is.
Well, Satan, the devil, evil, has an influence over mankind, but ultimately, I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, all the addiction counseling I do, I tell people, people are terrified of accountability and personal accountability. And when I was doing addiction ministry, and I still am, we're just now bringing it back, the state, the people that I worked with in those circles that worked with the state would not get into my circle, so to speak, or in my sandbox because I won't use victim language. And they're like, if you don't teach that it's a disease, if you don't use the disease model, you don't get funding. I said, I don't care. I'm not trying to get funding. I'm trying to tell the truth. People, if you tell people, you enable them with victim language and go, well, it's not your fault. Then they leave thinking, well, can't help. It's not my fault. I had a hard life, and that's why I do meth. That's nonsense. There's a personal accountability, and people are terrified of it. They don't want it. They want to pass the buck, and that's the same thing with the devil. Devil made me do it. No, he didn't. You did that. Now, your school of thought may have been influenced at a young age by the devil, but coming back to my last question, the presence of evil should be enough to make someone understand what good is. And I don't like this whole idea that there's people that don't want accountability. So when things go really far south, they say, well, it was Satan. Now, Satan has an influence in this world. He's not omnipresent. He's not everywhere at once. He's not God. I seriously doubt that Satan went to this one guy and spent the afternoon with him. And, Satan does his work by influencing how people think, and then they keep doing that. Mm-hmm. They keep doing it because it feels good. And you agree with that or disagree?
I agree.
Yeah. So it's accountability anyway. I started a big seal barking fit because talking about personal accountability and people trying too much to shift the buck on the devil. What say you?
I completely agree with you. I think that, people who say the devil made me do it, I think that's a cop-out. I think that's not taking accountability for your own actions.
Yeah.
But if someone has gone clinically insane,
that's a different story.
That's a whole different story, but that's still not necessarily the devil. It's this fact that the person's insane and they no longer know the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
Because they don't know they're supposed to eat with a fork either. That's not the devil's doing.
I think those cases are more rare though than the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's like drug addiction. I tell people, you did this, and there are exceptions to the rule. There are children who were born from a mother who was a drug addict. There are senior citizens who are overly prescribed medications in nursing homes, and they become dependent. I know that. We're not talking about that group of people, though. It's like, so you said with the insane, you're right. I know. There are people who just don't have their faculties.
But then at the same time, if Pol Pot said, the devil told me to kill all those people.
Demons. I believe it's a demon. I'm not saying, I'm not absolving saying that Satan or the devil doesn't do that. But I'm saying just by the sheer vast number of people in the world.
Exactly.
A lot of people, won't accept personal accountability.
Yeah, the devil's not hanging out with you.
Yeah, right.
All day, every day.
It's like
no one else.
I heard some pastor was talking about, he went to this convention to listen to these people who were reincarnated, and what nonsense it is. He said, have you ever noticed when people are reincarnated, they say their last life, they're always something great, something amazing. He goes, there were 3 Napoleons at this convention.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, just a side note. I'm sorry, I had to get out. That's funny, but Yeah, I think, the demons and the devils affect people, but it's not always.
Why do demons and the devil have to be present given original sin and the human hearts? I mean, it's the default setting
Right.
to disobey God. So,
Because the human heart's hostile, addicted to experience hunting, it's hostile towards God.
so now the question is, what specific situations does a demon or the devil need to show up to push you over the edge?
Yeah, I have
an even worse decision.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that.
Compared to what you would just do anyway,
Yes.
because of power, because of,
Sex, money, lust, power, all that.
I mean, power is the huge one.
A big one. Yeah, because you can acquire the other things if you've got power over people.
Yeah.
So can you quantify it?
Yeah.
That's a
Boy,
good-
how do you get to that point?
No. What I mean is, how do you quantify what decision level would reach the point where a demon has to get involved?
Well, again, I have to look at from the simplistic point of view. Basically, on that to me, you don't really know. I mean, we're talking about beings that dwell outside of the finite, and so what requirement would it take for them to get involved? That's a very interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm like deep in the question right now.
I'm deep in that. That is a big question.
The hamster is spinning on the wheels and won't stop.
Yeah. When I tell people, they say, well, why does God allow evil to exist? I say, well, why doesn't he stop it or wipe evil out? And I say, God could wipe out evil now, right this second. Let's say 1, 2, 3. There's no more evil. And then it's in the hearts of people. So it would pop back up like dandelions in milliseconds. It's right back because that's where it comes from. And so to say God can't wipe it out, yeah, he can.
He would just take away free will.
Jesus Christ is basically God saying, listen, if you really want to get away from evil, follow me. Come here, follow me. It's that simple. And then you go, okay, or you don't. I mean, that's the snapshot of Jesus Christ in the world, God in human form in the world. You hate this evil stuff. I hate it. Well, follow me and you'll be all right. What do you mean I'll be all right? There's bear traps all down this hallway. There's thorns. There's it's going to hurt. Follow me. Look what they did to me. Follow me.
By the way, Kevin, the original sin is probably one of the only doctrines that can be proven empirically.
Okay.
All you have to do is go outside and look around.
Yep.
There's evil everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really the only doctrine that can actually be proven.
Go ahead.
Okay. So for a second, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole. So if we all have original sin, is it a child's responsibility if they act and do something very, 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 very wrong if they haven't been baptized?
Now you're talking the age of accountability.
Right.
Yes, and I don't know the age of accountability. I have no idea.
And
It's probably different for every individual.
Yeah.
You have to get to a point.
it comes right back to that question you asked. What point do you have to get to for a demon to be able to influence you to kill 1 million people? What if it was a child who hadn't been baptized and killed 1 million people? Was it the devil or was it the child acting on their own impulses?
First of all, the devil never forces you to do anything.
Right.
The devil tempts you.
But if they already have original sin,
Then that's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different discussion on original sin as opposed to the devil and evil and his relationship to evil. That's two different topics. Not that they weren't initiated by the same fellow,
right.
but Adam and Eve were in the garden, and it was, by the way, that's what my cartoon was. I had the Garden of Eden, and then I had a little sign on it that says "Snakes not allowed." And then my caption was, well, what would have happened had God posted this sign? So anyway.
Like my grandmother threatened to disown my entire family if I was not baptized. Because if I was not baptized, then I had original sin, and my sin would permeate my family.
Baptism is not the forgiveness of sins. There's nothing in baptism that we're supposed to be baptized, but but there are people who believe this is fresh in my mind because I've been reading about it for 2 days, and baptism doesn't forgive sins. But it's coming into the anyway. Go ahead.
It's this belief that you're bringing the devil with you. You're bringing sin with you.
Yeah,
We bring sin with us even if we're baptized.
No matter what.
Yeah, we do it no matter what.
You don't all of a sudden wake up a Mother Teresa after you've been baptized.
Right.
Nope.
You're still.
Even I could use the force after I was baptized.
Yeah, well.
No. I told my kids that. I go, you need to get baptized because you can use the force after, of course I was kidding. Sorry, other pastors are watching. Go, what kind of guy is this? Hey, just joking around. Yeah, it doesn't absolve sin. It's coming into the family of Christ, accepting the death. There's a lot of principle to it. There's a lot of meaning to it, but it doesn't absolve sins. It's weird for people to think that. It's like Dave said, we take sin everywhere. Every single one of us. I may say something harmless, but it influences someone else's thought process, and their thought process is now changed because of something negative I may have said, and that could send them down a whole path in the wrong direction. So. We unknowingly do it.
Undue influence. Mm-hmm. So I could punch you in the face right now, and that could influence him to say, well, if it's okay to punch him in the face, if there's no consequences to
I've always
punch him
wanted
in the
to punch
face.
him in the face.
I think I have a 5 here, though.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have 4 Christians here.
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's okay to punch you in the face, is it okay to go rob a liquor store?
Are you talking about the standards of how bad sin is?
Sin and evil and...
Yeah. That's another thing that Christians like to say that's wrong. Well, all sin's the same. No, it's not.
No.
It's
In
not
my
all the
head,
same.
it's
And all
not.
rewards aren't the same either. The rewards in heaven aren't the same. They're all different. And it's like you said, I believe there is a greater sin. Punching somebody in the face is not the same as threatening to take people's lives with a firearm, I'm assuming, and robbing a bank. I mean, to me...
There are also times when sin or evil can be good.
How?
Well, look at World War II. Look at the people who hid the Jews, and the Nazis would come to their door. One of the 10 Commandments is don't lie. Do you have any Jews in your house? No, I don't. And the house is chock full of Jews.
So technically, they're sinning, but for a greater purpose.
If you're going to go by the letter of the law, yes, they're lying. They should say, yes, they're all upstairs. But they did not.
Yeah, I think if you presented that to Jesus, I think he would have something to say about it, because that's what's so fascinating about the Bible. When we read it, we take it for granted because we already know what it says. But if you were there when people like what you just said, if someone confronted Jesus with that and said, but they're lying. Now, people did that to him all the time, and he always had a way to respond, like render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. They tried to trap him up there, and when they tried to trap him up because they were eating on the Sabbath, and he said, they're like, how's he going to respond to this? So the Sabbath was made for man. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath. And he always had an answer, and I think what you just said is profoundly, I think it's true, and I think it's important. But it also makes me think, if Jesus could answer it, he would say something that the 4 of us are incapable of thinking of, an answer.
Well, you got that right.
Yeah, he would say an answer that we are not capable of thinking of, and then we would have it, just like we have everything else he said in the Bible. Because when you read some of his answers to questions, it's easy now because we know how the story goes. Oh yeah, look what he said. That's clever. Well, I can imagine forever how he would answer that, but I bet there's a way. I bet there's an answer he would have for that would enlighten us, because it just seems...
Sure, he'd just say, let he who is without a Jew cast the first lie.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
But it's the same. I mean, it's the same as the parallel, what you just mentioned, when they were picking the wheat and eating it on the Sabbath. His answer was, you have the letter of the law, and then you have the spirit of the law. So, again, the 10 Commandments were given to the ancient Hebrews because they needed a baseline.
Right.
So, yes. In fact, we had a pastor who was kind of reprimanded once because he he made the comment that if you are a Christian, the Ten Commandments are irrelevant. And his point, which he explained thoroughly, was once you become a Christian, the Holy Spirit is guiding you, and he will never lead you in opposition to the Ten Commandments. But
that's poppycock, because the Holy Spirit does guide you. That doesn't mean you always follow. I mean, you go against God's will too.
But the point is, the Ten Commandments were a baseline. The Holy Spirit is a much higher baseline. So that was his point. And of course, the people in the church who were letter of the law, it's like, oh, that was just awful. You can't say that.
Blasphemy.
Legalism.
Yeah.
Legalistic
Yes.
Christians. Well, that's why when Jesus kept correcting the Pharisees, I mean, trying to trip people up on tiny little matters. He said, you filter out gnats and you swallow up camels, and which is true. You worry about this little minuscule stuff while you yourself don't get the broad picture of what's going on here. Anyway, but yeah, I don't want to go too far off the path. But
What was the path?
I lost. I lost
think
it.
there was. Your question was, does any good come from evil?
Oh, we're going way back now.
I didn't know we answered.
Well,
I didn't know we
just-
answered the question.
Yeah, I think we kind of did in the conversation, but I mean, from my perspective, yeah, people can take what they learn from evil events and use that to understand what good is. I mean, when something evil's happening, you know what the standard for good is. If you're in some horrible circumstances because someone's evil, you're duct taped in somebody's basement, and you get out and you see your loved ones there, that the good is going to overwhelm you.
For a moment. So I probably should have said this going into this, but I have a different perspective on a lot of this stuff because you two are learned theologians. You have been a Christian your whole life?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm a baby Christian. I've only been a Christian for 7 years. So I'm still learning.
So what's your school of thought on this?
So to me, it's like the so what theory. So yes, somebody holds a woman in their shed for 7 years and has them tied up. And then when they come out, there's this moment of good. I'm being reunited with my family. Everything's good. I appreciate all that is good. What happens the next day?
Right. You live with the effects of evil.
To me, the positives are so very temporary.
They are temporary, and that's why you in your faith, you have to, it's like I say in church all the time, the eternal perspective. Mm-hmm. The eternal perspective. You can't look at it like this is all I get, meaning time, womb to tomb, here, this is it. You have to think about the eternal perspective. God will make things right. Things are made, because there's balance everywhere. Everything restores itself. I don't care what it is, it restores itself. You know the Creator by looking at the creation. And everything gets restored. It does. If a whole forest burns down to the ground, what happens? Well, rain comes, wind comes, animals eat plants, they come in, their droppings leave seeds. I don't care how long it takes. It will eventually grow back. When we destroy nature eventually repairs itself. We live in a world that self-corrects, and all things that we're involved with that we ruin will be corrected.
In that perspective, now throw that into evil. If everything we do is going to eventually get turned around and recycled into good, then can evil be recycled into good? I think that's why I'm
God
asking.
can take anything evil and use it for something good. I don't think God, that's not to be mistaken with, God makes evil things happen for good reasons. That's not what I mean. He can take something evil and use it for something. Somebody asked me one time, they said, well, if that's true, tell me how God took that little girl, this was a long time ago, raped and killed by a crackhead and buried under his trailer for 3 weeks. And they found that little girl's body. She was 8 years old. What did God do there that was good?
Right.
What good came out of that?
Right.
And my first response was, I don't know, but I know it brought a nation to their knees in prayer. I know it brought a state, a neighborhood, and families across 5 counties to their knees in prayer. I know more people showed up to church. I can't answer specifically because I don't live in the spiritual realms, but that little girl's not suffering. Because you define life from here to there, she's beyond there now. And we're here to say, well, what do we do with this? And that was my answer.
I was thinking about universal versus individual, because what she was saying just brought to mind someone in my family is like the leader of an international cult that in the past advocated the sexual abuse of children. So a wonderful cult, of course. And children were born into this cult through the 70s and 80s and grew up to be young adults. And many, many of them committed suicide because of just what they had been raised with. It was just so evil that, what happens to those people? Mm-hmm. What happens to the souls of those people who were just so abused for, their entire lives? Mm-hmm. Was there something good that can come out of that? Maybe on a universal perspective, but on the individual perspective, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think there is in this life that something good. That I think it's the good that comes is beyond that. And when when people are changed as a result of abuse, I mean, God. When people ask me that, when I have to give a quick answer, but the best answer I can think of, and they say, "What's God going to do with this?" And I go, "You know what He's going to do? The right thing." Whatever the right thing is what He's going to do. And I go back to that same thinking about the questions Jesus answered, and how if you can remove yourself from His answers and think right when He heard the question, if you were standing there, you'd be like, "There's no way He can answer this," and then He did. And I think it's the same way with those people. I think with the evil that comes out of it, and with the people themselves, whatever God's going to do is the right thing, and I just don't know what that is. What do you think, Dave?
I think you need to look at it from the eternalist perspective.
Yep.
We're just here temporarily, and the horrible, awful things that happen here they stop here. Once we die, and I'm quite familiar with death because, one, I was an ER doc, and 2, I'm an old man, so I deal with it every day. I wake up and go, "Whoa, I'm here." But there is an eternal perspective to everything. The poor girl who was 8 years old was raped and killed and buried. She is, in my mind, in a better place. Why she got there, I don't blame God for that. I blame a killer, a rapist. I don't blame her for it. She's innocent.
Right.
But the eternal perspective would say that God, that man who died for us on the cross, is an infinitely, infinitely gracious man.
Yeah.
And He's not going to hold her responsible for that.
Right.
He is not.
You're referring to people that are born in a cult.
Born in a cult, or that little 8-year-old girl you're talking about that's buried under. There's a lot of things here that we have a tendency to look at our world as if this is our world, and it's not.
Right.
We were created into this world, but from here on out, there's no end. There is another world out there that we can't even see the end of it or even comprehend.
We got to get outside of the glass bubble. You're hitting the table again.
Am I hitting the table?
It's okay.
It's like you're like a judge. Yeah.
If I ever come here again, I'm going to wear a boxing glove.
I know. I got to get this table denoised. But no, I agree. I agree with your point.
In answering, there is no answer to your question, actually.
There,
but the question
yes,
is,
I know that.
the only answer, the only concept that I could say is that don't judge what's going to happen by what happens here.
Right.
Because here is just a blink of the eye.
When I first became a Christian, another pastor told me that your life here in this plane is like a parade route. God can see the whole thing. He can see how it started, He can see how it's going, and He can see how it ends. You only get to see the part of the parade that passes in front of you. So he already knows all this stuff is going to happen. So in that case of the cult person, he saw it from the beginning to the end. And I feel like not that he let bad things happen, but again, it's still free will. And if he allowed all that to happen and get to the point where the person did commit suicide, then
It wasn't just one.
right.
It was dozens and dozens.
Oh, yeah.
But-
pedophilia is the victims of that.
Yeah.
It's just rampant with
But I can't
suicides.
in my head think, oh, well, they committed suicide, boom, they're going to hell.
No. You can't. Yeah, you can't make that judgment call. I mean, I did a whole sermon on this. That's another sermon, but I don't tell people that. I don't teach people. People ask me, well, my so-and-so killed themselves. Are they going to hell? And I say, I mean,
That goes back to legalism.
well, it goes
Right.
back to first of all,
Right.
I said first if I say listen, if you have a child, he's got Tourette syndromes and he blurts out profanities, his mental problems, and he tortures small animals, or I go, is that his fault if he's not of sound mind? And they go, no. I go, okay. So do you think God punishes people who are not of sound mind? And they say, no. And I go, okay. Do you think someone who kills themselves is of sound mind? Well, no, I guess not. I go, it's not only that, but you also don't know what happened in the last 2 seconds before that person died. Boom, I'm cutting my wrist. I want to die. I'm out of here. I start to get cold and dizzy. I'm like, oh, God, what have I done? Please, Lord, don't. I don't know. They could have done that. They could have called out to Christ. It is terrible advice spiritually, as any spiritual leader or just any person, to tell someone else that you know for a fact that if someone they love killed themselves, that they're in hell. Because it's poppycock. You're pretending to know something that only God knows. And now I tell people, I can't tell you who's in hell, but I can tell you how to get there. And I can tell you ways to avoid going there. But I think it's spiritually irresponsible and dangerous to tell people this broad stroke statement that suicides are all in hell. I think it's...
So then you couldn't say that the devil made them do it or that something evil made them do it if they were not of sound mind.
I don't know.
I'm trying to bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. Well, the devil gets involved in everything. He's involved in human affairs, human thinking. I think God recognizes when one of his own have been cheated versus when one of his own have sinned of their own free will. So anyway, that's my take.
So what do you think would happen to mankind if we didn't have evil? Or is that even a possibility? Like,
I hate to say this. Life would be difficult and boring because what would you do? I mean, everything you do every day, you're trying to fight against something. Like even working. You work because you don't want to be homeless and starve.
Right.
I mean, everything you do is purpose driven. And I feel like we want to fight against evil. We may have our bills in a row. We may have all that. Next thing, what do you want to do? You want to rescue people, help people. Go ahead.
Brings to mind Hugo Weaving in The Matrix.
I'm not a fan.
Well, his explanation was when they first created The Matrix, they made it like a paradise where everyone was happy all the time, and it just fell apart. So they had to do it more realistically, where there was conflict and essentially evil. So, but the same basic premise. And I would think that without evil, I don't think you would have emotion. Because
or
you wouldn't
passion.
have emotion at all. I mean, it's just, how do you have emotion? You have emotion as a result of free will. And if you don't have free will, I just don't see that emotion would be possible.
What about opinion even? Do you think people would be sheep if we didn't have this ability to have a different opinion?
Yeah, I think.
Well, what's that? I mean, but you're saying because your original question was if there was no evil.
If there was no evil, would we all just be Stepford wives, sheep?
Basically robots.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought.
Or would someone suddenly step over that line?
Someone did.
Right? Exactly.
And look at the results. We're the result of it.
Is it inevitable?
I can't even view that as a possibility.
Yeah.
Since we have the attributes of God, and one of the big attributes of God is free will. God has free will. He gave us some of his, or most of his attributes, actually. There's quite a few we don't have. I can't move a mountain, for instance. Maybe a small anthill, but certainly not a mountain. But there are many attributes that we have, and one of them is free will. And of course, God has free will. And he gave that to Satan. And it's obvious because Satan made a decision even before the earth was formed, even before the universe was formed.
I think it works different in the creation than it does in the creator. Free will implies for us we can make the wrong choice. And because people always say, well, I have free will.
Well, of course. Well, Satan made the wrong choice, didn't
exactly.
he?
But God can't
And
make
he
the wrong
allowed it.
choice. Right.
God can't make the wrong choice.
Right.
Well, then God doesn't have free will.
No, that's
That-
not true because
Then
we can
could
only
make
think
the
of
wrong
it.
choice.
We
Can he make a mistake? Is he fallible?
I think it comes down to whatever choice God makes is the definition of good.
Right. That's and that's what I meant by
Not to say that God doesn't have free will.
Right.
what's well.
just that
No, I
his-
said in the same way that as like in the way that we do humanity, because we have the capability
Oh, we have
of doing
he has the same options that we do.
of doing evil.
It's
but
just that our choices really mess things up.
But we have a choice to do what is in His will, and we have a choice to go against His will. His will is ironclad. Whatever He does is good.
And he didn't have a choice to go against his own will.
Why would He do that? That's
We
like
do
the
it- we
Jesus
do it all
telling
the time.
we're fallen.
But then God doesn't have free will if God can't go against.
That's like saying,
his own
can
rules
God
and
make
regulations.
a stone bigger than He can move? Then it's a fault if He can't because He can't make it, and if it's a fault if He can't because He can't move it. That's
Well,
just
you're
a play
talking
on
about things
words.
that God can't do. Well, that God can't make.
God
make
can't
a
lie,
triangle
but
with
we
four
say,
sides.
but when we use the language and we use words like can't, that's something we're accustomed to. Can't, or we
Well,
put it in the
okay,
negative.
Let's just say that God has free will, but He won't make the wrong decision.
Right.
That's
what
That's-
he was-
that's the
I
way
think
to put it,
I
because
think that was his
I think
point.
it's reversed.
Can't
because
is a limitation. What's reversed?
saying that he won't make the wrong choice because right and wrong don't have meaning to God because whatever he does is right.
He's right.
Right.
So
And that's
there's-
what I said earlier about
profound.
God.
I mean,
What's good to God is not necessarily what we would always define as what's good to us.
Oh heavens, no!
Right. So, we're there. We're closing at the
we're at 58.
yeah.
You got a couple more minutes.
So let's head for the exit. What do you guys want to talk about? What's like would be your closing thoughts on this topic? I know it's a big one because it's like I said, the finite is swallowed up and overwhelmed by the infinite, and this conversation will go on forever. It's just
And it already has.
what's your final what's your final thoughts, Dave?
I was waiting for Kevin to give his.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Kevin.
Me? If Adam didn't have any knowledge of good and evil, how did he know that disobeying God was evil?
Well,
Another logic issue, but
yeah, I don't think I don't think he thought it was evil. He just knew he was not doing what he was instructed to do.
but how did he know that was wrong? If he didn't have knowledge of good
If
and
he
evil.
didn't have
Well, when I
knowledge of
was
good and
told
evil.
not to ride my bike off the ramp,
you
and I
you
did
had
it.
knowledge of
the black
Good
eye,
and
the
evil.
skin, knee, and the stitches told me, yep, that's how I knew it was evil. No, I that's a theological. So
Yeah.
you want to part ways on a big question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give us something
final thought.
Okay.
for part 2.
All right. What about you, Dave?
I think that evil is not that mystical. It just is. It's a concept. It's the lack of good, and whether or not we understand it is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, we have a way out, and it's called Jesus Christ.
Yep.
It's called the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and life eternal. God has provided us all that we need to know, and that is the answer. Even before we don't even understand the question, God has already given us the answer, and that's all we need to know. It's like reading the book of Job. Whoops, here I go, pen on the table. It's like the book of Job. I read the book of Job hundreds of times. Being of Jewish my mother being a Jew, I spent a great deal of time reading the Torah and the Pentateuch and so on and so forth. And one of the books that fascinated me was Job. And at the end, God came down and spoke to Job. And he did not answer any of Job's questions. But in the end, what did God say? And I think it's one of the deepest theological thoughts there is. And that is, God said just 4 things. I'm God, you're not. And I'll add, deal with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Dave. Even as a baby Christian, a lot of the stuff in the Bible and a lot of stuff in life is not fair. But
By our standards.
by our standards, it's not fair. But there's a purpose for it. And you have to have that trust and belief to say, to try to figure out what the purpose could have possibly been when something truly evil happens.
Yeah.
But there is a purpose.
Yeah.
One final thought, the human brain can hold maybe between 5 and 9 things at the same time. And
Not
any
my
action, well, 2 in yours, but
Yeah, 2.
anyway, so given any action, anything any decision, anything that goes on, God has to hold trillions upon trillions of interactions at the same time and evaluate all of them. And he knows, it's just, we have no concept of what that is like. So if we pray for something and it's not answered, does that mean, God's not just looking at that one request, he's looking at trillions of other things at the same time.
Well, right, and the cause and effect, what
Yes.
what it'll do. And I don't think any prayer goes unanswered. It's just that the answer is not always yes.
Right.
So,
And silence could be an answer.
yeah, right. So that's, I think we close out for me. If I got the last word, I think the most important point that we made in this conversation is that we're living in a finite time and we're asking questions about infinite things. And the most important thing is, like Dave said, to remember Jesus Christ, because that is God in this world, and the eternal perspective. So when life seems like it's not fair, it's because it's not. But through Christ, we enter into an eternity. And this is just a pebble in our shoe. And that's even an exaggeration, really. So anyway, that's all I got. So, all right. Well, I guess, thanks, guys. This flew by. We could have talked about this for hours, but you guys need to come back. We'll pick another topic, maybe something.
We could go on with this one.
Something that we can,
Forever.
something that we can get. Yeah, I don't know. Something that's not so massive. We can. Maybe we'll pick something specific and have some fun with it. You going to come back? Would you come back,
Sure.
Kevin?
Sure.
All right, cool.
I'm retired.
Well, Jackie and I will be here. So, all right. Thanks, guys.